Warraneable, I think. Warraneable means something.
So the term Warraneable.
Warraneable, it's...
Warraneable.
You heard the term Warraneable, Gerald.
Warraneable, that's right, yeah.
I don't know what the term Warraneable, it's hard to define.
It's very interesting. I was thinking about this before I came here. That's one word that comes in here that everybody knows here, but probably if you came from outside, you'd have no idea what it was about. It was first introduced, I think, to do with what movies were shown here.
One day a numerary comes to me and says, I've got a job to do, I've got to choose the video or the movie we're going to watch for the week. And I said, oh, I've got the perfect one, it's called Made. I saw it with my father even, so I think it's totally fine. He said, oh, is it Warraneable? I said, mate, it's totally Warraneable.
Warraneable means entertainment or pastimes that actually respect those boundaries.
I think the strict definition that I've always heard is something's Warraneable if you'd be happy to do or say it in front of Arthur.
If you can't say or do this thing in front of Arthur, then you shouldn't do it.
You know, what would Arthur think if he was in the room?
I think the best explanation I ever heard was, you wouldn't do or say it in front of Arthur.
If Arthur was in the room with you or looking over your shoulder, would you do that?
If you wouldn't do something in front of Arthur or the master or whoever it is, then there's a pretty good chance you shouldn't be doing it.
I think Jeremy Blades would say the term Warraneable means don't be a dickhead.
One number rule in Warrane that we always tell the first years, and that's don't be a dickhead.
The thing that comes to mind for me when I think of Warraneable is the culture, what's, I guess, acceptable and what they promote.
When you do something that's in the best interest of the college, that's something that's Warraneable.
I think that's a pretty good criteria to carry through most of your life, actually.
It's easy to not appreciate the importance or the work that they do. They're very much behind the scenes.
I think one of the reasons Warrane has stood for 50 years and probably continues standing for a long time is because first it is built on good foundation.
Yeah, this is the interesting thing about Warrane is that you have people who are some really classic characters. Arthur's was here just starting when I was here actually.
Dave Bolton and Joe Martins. So there was a lot of folklore obviously associated with the place.
Oh, Dave played a very important role in those early years too, because he had a kind of magnetic personality and he could attract people. Yes, I think I can say at the beginning, for the first 12 years, I was very much frontline, hands-on in the action. Well, the first 3 or 4 years, that was really, you know, I had to go and speak to the Roundhouse, 4,000 students there, calm things down, you know.
I remember Dave Bolton having to go up and argue on the top campus. He used to go up there and wave the flag of the college.
They were difficult years, the university was changing, young men were changing. You had to be part of the mob, basically.
The thing that was difficult for us at the very beginning was to try and get across what we were trying to achieve here. That's what it was about. How do you create the environment here? And I always said there's a number of things you've got to have, but you've got to have a lot of dedicated staff.
I came to Warrane from the US. I was invited to say, well, you know, this Warrane is starting up in Sydney, and would you like to come out? So I thought, well, this is fantastic.
Dr. Joe Martins was the head of college then, and he was he was a very kind person.
Father Joe Martins had enormous influence, and he was the one that took the brunt of a lot of the protests. There was a big cry of Joe must go.
Some of this opposition to the college was actually organised at the level of some student bodies, and they spray painted or graffiti around the campus. You know, Joe must go. You know, meaning that I should get kicked out and the university take over the college or something like this. You know.
Yeah, they had the effigy. They were burning the effigy in front of the college. We were ostracised a little bit. That we were ostracised on the campus. If you said you came from Warrane, some people get a little bit agitated by that.
There were some tense moments, but by and large, everything worked out fine. You know? And people were praying too. I mean, as a matter of fact, the founder of Opus Dei, St. Josemaria, whom I had met briefly on my way to Australia from the US, he had told someone that he was praying a lot, you know, for Warrane, and you could tell.
My wife and I came back to Sydney in late 1970, and there was already trouble in this form of protests about Warrane, what it stood for. So I contacted the then master, Dr. Joe Martins, and he invited me to an evening of recollection. It sort of went from there.
I got to know Tony very early on, and he was always very supportive, and then he became a fellow of the college. Tony would organize programs at the college, and eventually, of course, he became master further down the track.
Well, it was certainly tough in the early 70s in that there were protests. It was the time of the anti-Vietnam War protests, and while the Vietnam War and Opus Dei were quite different, the rent-a-mob crowd seemed to see them as one.
And that really is the case with Warrane, that it was a place that was rejected originally.
I remember Gerald Fogarty. He looked exceptionally young. Not that he looks exceptionally old now, but very enthusiastic, very happy.
Gerald was 2 doors down from me in first year. He was one of the hardest workers I'd ever seen.
Gerald was a great guy, and he's a guy that was here. I think even at that stage he had been 10 plus years as the deputy master. You know, he was a guy that basically gave his life to looking after us, and you know, I talk a bit about the formative elements of college life, and I think, you know, one of the things that happened here was some people and Gerald was probably a big part of that, with a lot of patience, took the time to explain some stuff that I think in any other college people just wouldn't go to the effort. And so, you know, I have a lot of respect for Gerald. I think he's done a great job here, and he's been incredibly generous to the many generation of young men that have come through this place, and trying to help them to sort of form them into better men.
The people are pretty consistent. There's Tony, there's Arthur, there's Jared Fogarty. You know, I think it's good, stable. It's good to have a good, stable personnel. That gives a good, stable culture.
My main support is actually of Arthur, because being the dean, he is extremely important in terms of he's a role model for many, and I do pray for him, for his leadership, because that's so important. And he's a man of fine character. He says what he means and means what he says, and he's got a good heart too.